Industrial Revolution didn't start with machines. It started a century earlier, in silence, in ideas. In the 1600s, when the old world began to break and the modern world was quietly born. The Industrial Revolution did not begin overnight. It was not sudden. It was not accidental. Before factories ruled the world, something else came first. The 1600s, a century of quiet change, a century where the old world began to crack and the new world slowly took shape. This was the foundation. This was the beginning. The world before industrialization. In the early 1600s, most people lived the same way for centuries. Life was rural, work was manual, farming controlled survival. Most goods were made by hand. Homes were workshops. Families produced what they needed. Trade was limited. Travel was slow. Technology barely advanced. Society was rigid. Kings ruled. Churches controlled ideas. Change was dangerous. Tradition was law. Why the 1600s matter? The 1600s were not industrial, but they were revolutionary. This was the century of transition. Old systems weakened. New ideas emerged. Science challenged religion. Commerce challenged feudalism. Money began to matter more than land. This shift changed everything, even before machines existed. The decline of feudalism. For centuries, feudalism dominated Europe. Landowners held power. Peasants worked the land. Social mobility was almost impossible. But in the 1600s, this system began to collapse. Trade expanded, cities grew, money replaced loyalty, wages replaced obligation. People were no longer tied to land forever. This created a free labor force, a key ingredient for industrialization. The rise of merchant capitalism. A new class emerged in the 1600s, merchants, traders, businessmen. They invested money to make profit. This system was called merchant capitalism. Raw materials were bought cheap. Goods were sold expensive. Profit became the goal, not tradition, not religion, but growth. Capital accumulated, and capital would soon fund machines. Global trade expands. The 1600s were an age of exploration. European ships crossed oceans. Trade routes expanded globally. Spices, silk, sugar, cotton, silver. Everything moved across continents. Empires competed for control. Colonies supplied raw materials. Europe became the center of global trade. This created massive wealth and massive inequality. Colonialism and exploitation. Colonial expansion fueled early industrial growth. Colonies provided cheap resources. Labor was often enslaved. Plantations replaced local economies. Wealth flowed to Europe. This wealth funded innovation. Factories were still decades away, but the money was already there. Industrialization was being financed by exploitation. The scientific revolution. The 1600s were also the age of science. Old beliefs were questioned. Experiments replaced superstition. Observation replaced blind faith. Figures like Galileo challenged authority. Newton explained motion and energy. Science introduced laws of nature. Knowledge became systematic, predictable, measurable. This mindset was essential for machines because machines require understanding. Technology before machines. Technology in the 1600s was simple, but improvements mattered. Better tools appeared. Watermills expanded. Windmills improved. Mechanical clocks spread. Time became measurable. Precision increased. Production became more organized. Efficiency slowly improved. This trained society to think mechanically. The putting out system. Before factories, there was the putting out system, also called cottage industry. Merchants supplied raw materials. Families worked at home. Cloth was spun. Thread was woven. Goods were returned to merchants. This increased production, but avoided factories. It was an early production network, a bridge between old and new. Textile production in the 1600s. Textiles dominated early industry. Clothing demand constantly grew. Wool and linen were common. Cotton imports increased. Manual spinning limited output. Demand exceeded supply. This created pressure for innovation. The problem was clear. Production was too slow. Machines would soon be the answer. Population growth. Europe's population grew in the 1600s. Better farming reduced famine. More food meant survival. More survival meant labor. Cities slowly expanded. Urban demand increased. More mouths to feed. More clothes to make. More tools needed. Demand pushed progress forward. Financial institutions emerged. Modern banking began in the 1600s. Banks stored money. They issued loans. They reduced risk. Stock markets appeared. Joint stock companies formed. Investors shared profits and losses. Large projects became possible. This financial system later funded factories. Without banks, industry would stall. Governments and power. Governments began supporting trade. Navies protected shipping routes. Laws favored merchants. Patents protected inventors. Property rights strengthened. Innovation became rewarded. Risk became acceptable. This political environment encouraged growth. Industry needs stability. The 1600s created it. Early energy sources. Human and animal power dominated. Water power increased productivity. Coal mining expanded. Wood shortages forced alternatives. Energy demand increased. This pushed experimentation. Steam was studied, but not yet mastered. The idea existed. The execution came later. Social change begins. Society slowly transformed. Traditional roles weakened. Merit began to matter. Skill created opportunity. Wealth created influence. Education expanded among elites. Literacy increased. Information spread faster. Ideas traveled. Exchange accelerated. Resistance to change. Not everyone welcomed progress. Workers feared job loss. Guilds resisted innovation. Religious leaders opposed science. Riots occurred. New ideas felt threatening. This resistance would continue, even during full industrialization. Progress always creates fear. The stage is set. By the end of the 1600s, the world was ready. Labor was available. Capital was accumulated. Trade was global. Science had advanced. Energy demand increased. Old systems weakened. The conditions were perfect. Only one thing was missing: the machine. Transition into the 1700s. The 1700s did not start from nothing. They inherited momentum. Inventions arrived quickly. Factories replaced homes. Steam replaced muscle. Speed replaced tradition. The Industrial Revolution exploded because the 1600s prepared the ground. Final reflection. The Industrial Revolution began before machines. It began with ideas, with trade, with science, with capitalism, with ambition. The 1600s were the silent revolution, without smoke, without engines, but without them, the modern world would never exist.